Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Searching for Dragons. I'm Snappy, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host Graham. How you doing, Graham?
I'm all right. How are you?
Not too bad. Life is good. Life is good. I'm excited to be back after our bit of a hiatus. So, unfortunately, we had to take a few weeks off because of you were dealing with a bit of your health issues, but you're doing pretty good now, right, Graham?
Yeah. Overall, it's ready to move on.
Ready to move on. Life is good. So we apologize, but we're back full steam ahead here to talk about amazing, incredible artists from across history who incorporate magic and mystery into their art. And we're going back to the first person we ever talked about on this specific show, which is Madison Julius Cawein. So you had never heard of Madison before I brought him up to you, had you, Graham?
No, I wasn't familiar at all.
Right. This is someone who is kind of, I believe, unduly been forgotten to time and history. Right. Like oftentimes now, the only references you'll see to Cawein is in reference to the modernists because he was an influence on T.S. Eliot. Like famously, his poem Wasteland inspired T.S. Eliot's Wasteland in some ways. More thematically, though, T.S. Eliot's is a lot deeper and longer and more varied than Cawein, but there's a clear element there of influence. But that's largely what he's become in modern times, is kind of a footnote in the history of poetry. And I think this is kind of sad because this is someone who, you know, a few years back, I got into this habit of going to various like public domain poetry websites, and I just like click random and I'd read a couple poems every day, trying to find new things. And Madison kept coming up because he's written 36 volumes of poetry, or well over 1,500 poems.
It's a staggering amount.
It's a staggering amount of product, of like production that this person produced, and he didn't even live to be 50 years old. He passed away at age 49, just before the start of World War I in 1914, born 1865. So a short life, but an incredibly productive and incredible one. But all of Madison's work has basically entered into the public domain, and no one has been republishing his stuff. So it's wound up on a lot of these free sites in vast amounts. So I just started reading, most of his catalog. And over the last few years, I've read a lot of his poems, and I've decided that I want to read them all. That's my goal now, because they're all available for free online. And I've just become obsessed. So I wanted to basically select a few that I had found and that I thought were really brought that kind of magic that we're interested in, and share them with you and share them with our audience today. But also, before we go any deeper into the poetry, I want to do a bit of a background on Cawein for people who may not be familiar. So, right, like we said, born in 1865 in Kentucky. He comes from this wild family background, and it was such an interesting character. So his father was a herbalist and was famous for working very closely with many of the indigenous people in his area, and working with a lot of the people who lived off the land. And he developed his own medicinal herbal tonics and medicines and sold them. And he became so prestigious at doing this that he actually got recognized by the state of Kentucky and was given an official doctorate, even though he never went to school, was never educated. And Madison would talk about all of the years growing up where he would spend most of his time with his brothers and his father out in the wilderness looking for herbs and looking for rare plants. And this really inspired all of his poetry and all of his magic, this incredible deep love and connection to nature. So that's coming from his father. His mother is equally, if not even more so impressive. So she was Christiana Cawein, a prophetess and seer, a spiritual medium who channeled different ascended masters from all across history and developed sort of her own kind of following and eventually published a book. And it's a really interesting book. It was titled Women and Her Relations to Humanity, Gleams of Celestial Light on the Genesis and Development of the Body, Soul, and Spirit, and Consequent Moralization of the Human Family, offered especially to women for study and contemplation, not to the phenomena hunter, but to the true spiritual student and deep thinker, the true religions of magnetism, materialization, and reincarnation. So,
wow.
What a mouthful of a title. But that woman was training other women how to be witches. Okay. And it's a phenomenal read, a really interesting book. You can find it on the Library of Congress website. Just search Christiana Cawein and it will come up. It's an interesting read, and it shows incredible depth of philosophy, though, and magical understanding that really influences Cawein. So on one hand, he has the magic of the natural world, plant medicine, and this deep connection to the nature. And then on his other side, he has this spirituality and this incredible academic learnedness and depth of philosophy. And this is where he's coming out of. And he, as a very young man, starts writing around 10, 12 years old, and deeply influenced by Poe, Lord Byron, Percy Shelley, and John Keats. And he becomes published as early as 15. And he quickly becomes known as the Keats of Kentucky. Right? Funny little nickname. But he becomes very successful early on, and he manages to become his goal was to basically become a professional writer. And within a few years, he does this. He works as kind of a barkeep with his brothers in a gambling house, and also works on the stock market. But he eventually is able to become a professional writer, and he buys a house, he gets married, he has a family. He's very, very successful, but the winds of change come Madison's way. And the romanticism and mythology that he so deeply loved, the fairies and the Arthurian legend and all of this stuff that he was into, was now passé. Modernity was on the cusp. You know, the world was preparing for war, and modernization had taken the world by storm. And this was transforming language and poetry. And people were moving to more simple modernity type things. Like we're going to see shortly after Cawein, the birth of imagism, right? The birth of modernism, all of these incredible new poetic forms, things that Madison kind of shat on and was snobby about. And he refused to adapt, and his book stopped selling. And he wound up risking more and more on the stock market. And then you had sort of a depression, not the Great Depression, but you had a stock market crash, and his family lost everything. And he wound up dying, we believe, because of a combination of malnutrition and cold. He was giving all of his food to his family. He was not heating his home. He was living paycheck to paycheck in an extraordinarily desperate time. People had just started to get him money and support, and he passed away, aged 49. So a bright star, but one that didn't last long, and one that was snuffed out in a cruelly, uncaring world, you know?
Definitely. It's the weird juxtaposition of like this flourish of creativity and success, and then this like abrupt, cold erasure at the
Right,
end. You know.
right. I feel like he was a casualty of that coming age, that transformative time when they were entering into that world war and things were heating up, and he was one of the first and earliest casualties of that. As the world changes, if you cannot adapt, then those who cannot adapt get squashed, and it is so sad to see. But the beauty and magic of Cawein's poetry lives on, and I just want to tell, like, this is a person who often gets dismissed as writing children's fairy tales, nature stuff, and we got to show you, because he just has so much more depth and so much more beauty. So let's get into it.
Sounds good.
So, so this is a portrait painted of the man just before he died. This would have been around the time he was 47, 48 years old. And I just wanted to include that. Mm-hmm. But we're going to start off with this poem. It's called A Bit of Coast. And it says, one tree, storm twisted like an evil hag, the sea wind in its hair, beside a path, waves frantic arms, as if in wild witch wrath, at all the world, gigantic gray as slag, great boulders shoulder, through the hills or crag, the coast with danger, monster-like, that lifts huge granite round which wheel the gulls and swifts, and at whose base the rotting seaweeds drag, inward the hills are wooded valley cleft, tangled with berries, vistaed, dark with pines, at whose far end is twere within a frame, some trail of water that the ocean left, like gleams like a painting where one white sail shines, lit with the sunset's poppy-colored flame. What do you think of that one?
I love the rhyming patterns and just such interesting imagery. Like there was one line that I really liked. It was great boulders shoulder through the hills or crag, the coast with danger, monster. The great boulders shoulder through the hills. It just has this very like rumbling sort of rhythm to it, and it's a very beautiful poem. It really captures the coast,
right? You really get that imagery of the wrathful kind of waters crammling up against that rough hewn coast and these wild witch wrath. Like, I love that line. And I just wanted to show too, like, for Cawein, nature is these mythical beasts, and they're kind of entwined, right? It's this animism. His poetry is really defined by the spirit of the natural world, and he views these mythological characters and these imagery as being born of the natural world. So even though they're fantastic, they're connected to them, and he uses the poetry to kind of show you the true color and spiritual essence of these nature spirits. And this was one that really spoke to me, because it shows you that power of the craggy coast, those rocks, those nymphs, that water. This is a powerful image that we see in a lot of classic Greek mythology. Makes me think of the sirens and the nymphae, and lots of cool stuff. And it was just a nice short one to start with here. So this is a good one. It's called A Character. He lived beyond us, and we stood as pygmies to his eye, to his every mood, mere pupils at his beck and nod that spoke the influence of a god. And oft we wondered when his thought made our humanity seem naught, if he, like Uther's mystic son, were not a birth for Avalon. When wandering neath the sighing trees, his soul waxed genial with the breeze, that voiceful from the piney glades, championed seemed of Oreads. A dryad life lived in each oak, and with its many leaf tongues spoke Glory, glorying the deity whose power gave it gave its life in sun and shower. By every violet howled brook, where every bramble mattered nook rippled and laughed with water sounds, he walked as one on sainted grounds, fearing intrusion on the spell that kept some fountain spirits well, or woodland genius sitting where brown racy berries kissed his hair. And when the wind fair over the hill had fallen and left the wild wood still, as moonlight jets on quiet moth, beneath the pied boughs arched across, long limpid vistas, brimmed with ripe, green swimming sunbeams heard the pipe of some hid follower of Pan, and worshipper half brute, half man, whose hairy haunched, a savage rhyme, puffed in his reed to rudest rhyme, with swollen jowl and rolling eye, danced boisterous where the silver sky smiled in the forest broken roof, the strident branch beneath his hoof snapped in the sod which interfused between black roots with crushed and bruised. And often when he wandered through old forests at the fall of dew, a lone Endymion who sought a higher beauty yet uncaught, some night we thought most surely he were favored of her deity, and in the holy solitude her sudden presence long pursued, unto his eyes would be confessed the awful moonlight of her breast, come high with majesty and hold his heart's blood till his hearts were cold, unpulsed, unsinewed, all undone, and snatch his soul to sound Avalon.
Cool. Something. So, yeah, this is a really good one. Something, the animism sort of theme that you were talking about. You know, a dryad life lived in each oak,
Right?
and that's just like it's like the myth is in everything. You know, and it's
Exactly. Companion seemed of Oreads, which is another type of these kind of nymphi type creatures. They're everywhere, right? And this is really a powerful connection to these nature spirits, right? Like we have the imagery of Pan and the satyrs, right? He's half man and half brute, right? And they're conducting this spell through their song and their dance in the trees. And then he brings in the character of Endymion. Do you know the story of Endymion?
No, not familiar.
So Endymion in the myth, right? He falls in love with the goddess Artemis and then tries to track her down, right? And Artemis is the forever virgin, right? He's cursed by Aphrodite. And he tracks her down through her forest and spies upon her. But when he sees her, she comes in and destroys him, right? Because she cannot be seen by anyone and she cannot be beholden to any man, especially, you know, but it's this profound transgression, right? He's also trying to hint at this image that will come up often in his work is of this transgressive sublime, that monstrous feminine, this divine other that you desire, that you lust for, and it's through that lusting that you become destroyed. But this destruction is also an apotheosis, right? It's like a transformation. So it's like, come and take me, you know, and rip me apart, right? It's that Orphic desire for that destruction and transformation and that, you know, rebirth. And this is a central theme, this trying to glimpse the goddess, but to be destroyed by her, you know? And it's this confrontation with that divine other that Madison is seeking in the woods, in this fear of this other life, right? That is represented, like you said, in this animism. Was there anything else you liked about this one? I love the rhyme scheme too. It's just such a fun, dancing kind of song.
It's got a great rhythm to it, and there was one line that I really liked. I think it was near the end. The awful moonlight of her breast. You know, just something about that line. I was like, Again, it's like the divine feminine, and it's like the sublime, this awe, terrifying, awe-inspiring force, you know?
Right? It really is what Bataille describes when he's getting into those sacred extremes, right? This to perceive to perceive something truly divine, you have to be terrified of it, right? Like angels are these monstrous other figures, right? So the perception of some true divinity is almost a destruction, right? It's to be lost in the presence of something so far greater than the self that it destroys and negates the self, right? And it's in that negation that the transformation is possible, or that possession, right? Which is the heart of a lot of these ancient mysteries, right? It's that desire to be consumed in the image of this deity. And it's through that conception that you embody the deity and you become this divine being yourself, you know?
That's an interesting point, because that's very much what the traditional peyote ritual is about consuming the essence of the divine to become the divine.
Exactly, right?
You know, yeah, it's very interesting.
There's so much similarity with a lot of these various like religious or spiritual traditions that have an entheogenic or natural perspective. They all take on, you know, a Bacchic quality, even if they're from Mexico, right? And nowhere near the Greek world, right? It's like, but they have that similar color because of the nature of these plant spirits, I think, you know?
A quick anecdote, as Artaud would say. He says, "Who does not see that all these esotericisms are the same, and that they speak of the same thing, an attempt to reconcile man with life and with nature?"
That's such a beautiful line. Thank you for saying it. You've said it a few times, and it's perfect.
Yeah,
It's
a good one. It's a good one. Sorry to repeat myself.
No. It bears repeating. You're right. It's one I love. Okay, so
what do we have next?
We have next here, it's called a dream shape. So this is another thing that you'll see often in Cawein's poetry is dream imagery, right? So a dream shape. With moon-white hearts that held a gleam, I gathered wild flowers in a dream, and shaped a woman whose sweet blood was odor of the wildwood bud. From dew the starlight arrowed through, I wrought a woman's eyes of blue. The lids that on her eyeballs lay were rose pale petals of the May. Out of a rosebud veins I drew the fragrant crimson beating through the languid lips of her whose kiss was a poppy's drowsiness. Out of the moonlight and the air, I wrought the glory of her hair, that o'er her eyes blue heaven lay, like some gold cloud o'er dawn of day. I took the music of the breeze, and water whispering in the trees, and shaped the soul that breathed below, a woman's blossom breasts of snow. A shadow's shadow in the glass of sleep my spirit saw at her pass, and thinking of it now meseems we only live within our dreams. For in that time she was to me more real than our reality, more real than earth, more real than I, the unreal things that pass and die.
Oh,
What do you think?
A lot. There's a lot here. First of all, the languid lips of her whose kiss was a poppy's drowsiness, opium. You know,
Right?
that's a reference to the drug rates there, and just so good. I love the last passage. For in that time that she was to me more real than our reality, more real than earth, more real than I, the unreal things that pass and die. It's just like really resonates.
It's
And
so powerful.
it reminds me again of like it's like this force that persists and transforms, you know?
Yeah. It's that transformative eros, right? That love, power, that divine feminine, right? And it's like this is something I feel like a lot of people who engage with this kind of magic can relate to, experiencing that divinity within the dream, perceiving that ideal beauty, that feminine energy. Also, this is something I wanted to highlight because something that we see in a lot of the magical traditions, especially within the Greco-Roman tradition, is this belief in the dream, that the dream is its own reality and that the dream world is almost more real. And what you do in the dream world is equally, if not more so important. Like you're supposed to actualize and live a second life within the dream. You know, there's all these rites with like around the god Hypnos and around Asclepius and the sleeping and the healing magic. There's a lot of this idea too of speaking to the deity and perceiving the muse through the dream, you know, and this is clearly what he's doing. And this, you know, and it's that perception, like I think most of us can relate where we've had that dream where it's so real that it's more real than any reality. And then when you wake up, you're so disjointed. You feel like, you know, it's like you feel lost. And eventually it starts to fade as time goes on, but the taste lingers, you know?
Having the totality of your experience or of your being eclipsed by this image, these images that come to you in sleep, you know, and it's like it can destroy you, but through that, you know, destruction, there's an inherent possibility for transformation. Right. And that's what he's getting at, is like this dream is more real than I ever will be, has transformed me. Because
right. Go ahead, sorry, finish.
No. That's all I was getting at.
That's so beautiful, Graham, and you're so right. And I also want to highlight this idea that he's talking about in his dreams. He perceives the reality of deity, that which exists outside of time and space, that doesn't die. And he says that like we seem unreal because of our impermanence, our subjectness to change and constant transformation. This dream shape, this perception of the goddess that he can hardly even describe, yet is more real than any, like, this is so reminiscent of like Ligeia, if you read by Edgar Allan Poe, that short story we looked at, you know, when he's talking about how the perception of her was more real and more beautiful than anything. But then when he's asked to describe her, all he can describe is her eyes and can't remember anything about her, right? It's like, it's a dream. It's this vagueness. That's how dreams are remembered in the real world, you know? It's this perception of them. And they start to lose their reality the more we exist outside of them.
I'd also say that sorry, I'm just gathering my thoughts here. I was gonna say that like with Ligeia, you know, with this, where it's like they're trying to describe something that exists in a completely other dimension, another world, something that's experienced in a way that can't be conveyed with language.
Yeah.
But then he's doing it here.
Right. This is the grand paradox. It can't be conveyed, yet he's doing a pretty dang good job, and he's telling you
to good job, if you ask me. Yeah.
It's like, what's the best way to describe her? A dream shape. I'm like, that says it all right there. And also he tells you how to experience it through the essence of the poppy and the dream. It's that combination, right? It's your imagination and the use of the entheogenic plants and the spirit of the plant that brings you the perception of her, right?
Exactly.
Beautiful. I love this one. Okay. So this is another short one. A pool among the rocks. I know a pool whose crystalline repose sleeps under walls of granite, whence the pine leans looking at its image, line for line, repeated with the sumac, and wild rose that redden on the rocks, where at day's close the sunset dreams and lights incarnadine. Dark waters in the place seems brimmed with wine, a giant cup that splendor overflows. Night in her liveries of stars and moon stoops to its mirror, gazing steadily, and saddened by her beauty, drops one tear, a falling star, while round it sighs the rune of winds, conspirators that sweep from sea, whispering of things that fill the heart with fear.
Cool. I really like this. A falling star while round it sighs the rune of winds, conspirators that sweep from sea. You know, again, this is like this animism. It's linking this natural magic. You know, the rune of the wind. You
Yeah,
know,
no, it's so beautiful, and you're 100% right. Like what he's talking about is this magic that we see as above, so below. And also the magic of drawing down the goddess, of connecting to that star as Venus. But also recognizing that as above, so below, right? The goddess sees herself reflected in us. We are the pool among the rocks. The rocks are also spirits, right? They're also living beings. They're these nymphs, these essence, the wind, right? So even though there's this thing between us and the goddess, and she is this grand thing and we are this small insignificant thing, he's also reminding there's all these other intermediaries, right? It's this entire cornucopia that's being brought into you when you engage in these kind of rites of engaging with the spirit. You know, by engaging with the great mother, that star, you engage with the totality of being, right? It's like, this is why they talk about it brings it brings panic, that perception of the all, right?
it's like all the other natural magical forces are like an interstitial network between us and the divinity. You know,
Right.
kind of like between cells, there's like an interstitial network. It's like
And exactly. And there's all this clear imagery here that if for those with ears to hear, people will start to recognize the dark waters and the spirits of the nymphs of the waters, which drag people down, right? This is a constant theme in a lot of Hellenistic literature. The wine and the cup that overflows, and the necessity of the drinking of this cup in order to perceive the goddess, to become that mirror, to be the pool, right? It's like, to become that pool, you have to drink the waters, you have to drink her waters. And it's through this, again, this entheogenic rite and this connection with drawing down the stars and connecting to the spirits of the natural world, right? And this perception of the other that invokes fear, right? So something that a lot of people who confront this kind of literature don't get is that the perception of the other, of confronting deity, of confronting spirits, whether good or bad, it's always terrifying. You know, it's always a shock. It's always something that will shatter your ego, will force you into submission, you know? And to perceive deity is to be assaulted almost, right? And it's a good thing, like you said, it brings this transformation, but we have to acknowledge that. So when he's talking about the fear and that perception and the spirits warning them, you know, of you're drawing down this star, right? It's because that's that reality. To embody that deity is this painful, transformative act, right? It's a loss of self to that greater thing, you know?
well said. Well said.
All right, let's continue here.
Sure.
So we got Mayapple flower. What magic through your snowy crystal gleams? Your hollow spar spring breams with fragrancy, that like the cup of commerce drugs with dreams. This woodland place so drowsed with mystery, what miracle evolved you from the mold? Dreamed you as 'twere into reality, out of the winter's death and nights and cold? Are you a sign, a message that the spring out of her soul into the eyes reveals? A symboled something telling many a thing of beauty she within her breast conceals? The word significant that conquers death, that through eternity with nature deals, as did the Christ, Jesus of Nazareth? Or of the rapture of the earth apart? Are you a thought that crystallized from dew into a flower? Nature on her heart, bewildered from the hope from whence you grew? Your loveliness wears as an evidence of immortality, a hint, a clue to that which still evades our mortal sense.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Right? So I just want to start off because it happens right at the beginning here. Do you know who Comus is, or Comus?
I was gonna ask you.
This is the son of Dionysus. This is the god of revelry specifically, you know? So it's like, you know, he's kind of common part, the counterpart to Dionysus, and he would lead people in the dance and in the drinking. He's like, he brings the laughter and the gaiety, right? Which is implied with Dionysus, but it's even more refined and intense with Comus, you know?
Okay.
So what magic through your snowy crystal gleams, your hollow spar spring breams with fragrancy, right? So this magic of the smells and gnosis. We talk about this a lot on the channel.
Yeah.
That, like the cup of Comus, drugs with dreams. So the wine, this drink, they bring you the dream. And what we know the dream represents, this ability to connect to the divine, to enter into that underworld, to perceive and be able to talk to the goddess, right? Exactly. This woodland place, so drowsed with mystery, what miracle evolved you from the mold? You know, it's like this.
I love that line. What miracle evolved you from the mold? You know, it's like, reminds me of when Kronos castrates Uranos and the blood from his genitals fall, and wherever it lands, life springs forth.
Right.
You know, it reminds me very much of that.
Yeah, and you got to wonder, right? Because it would take to create something like a goddess or a transformative power, like a flower. Like he's describing this image that's representative of the entirety of the universe in that flower, you know, which is so cool. And it's like he's using the flower to connect to the woodland and to the greater universe and to the goddess herself. It's like, again, this idea is as above, so below. And with Cawein, it's through the perception of nature, through the perception of the spirits of these natural beings, that you can reach this divinity. And also through the dreams and through the drugs. And this is what he's telling you. And it's like, dreamed you as 'twere into reality, you know? And it's like, almost like he's like, I'm giving birth to you, and this act of believing in you makes you real. And the more I think about you, like anyone who engages in magic will understand this. The more you perceive it, the more you engage with it, the more reality it becomes, you know? So he's describing this transformative action of engaging in this process of drawing down this divine spirit. And he's talking about how this connecting to the spirit, you learn the secrets of life and death. You learn the truth of reincarnation and how to confront fear and how to die and be reborn. And he equates this with Jesus, right? The most famous dying and rebirthing God, you know? But it's important that he's putting Christ here as a secondary to this mysterious other, this divine feminine, right? That he never names outside of nature and the rapture of the earth, right?
A more profound primordial force than Jesus.
Right? Where Jesus is kind of fulfilling this ever reincarnating role. He's kind of like the latest in this dying and rebirthing mythos for Cawein, right? Mm-hmm. Cawein is really recognizing this central character of these religious philosophies that talk about this confrontation with death and this ability through the natural world to be transformed and reborn, right? This is not Christianity. Cawein is not a Christian by any means, you know. He's very much a mystic and approaching it through this mystical path, right? Of which Jesus is one character, you know, but he's more seen in that role as the Christ. And as we know, those of us who study the mystery, the Christ is someone who has died and been reborn. This is a savior role, a soteria. And you can trace it all the way back to Ishtar and Dumuzi, right? It's like one of the most primordial stories of humanity. So, all right. Let's keep going though. Unless you got anything else to say.
Wicked poem though. I love it.
Right? So cool. And again, right, the drugs, the dream, the divine feminine, the natural animism.
The drugs, the dream.
Right? A sunset fancy. Okay. Wide in the west, a lake, a flame that seems to shake, as if the Midgard snake deep down did breathe, an isle of purple glow, where rosy rivers flow, down peaks of cloudy snow, with fire beneath. And there the tower of night, with windows all alight, frowns on a burning height, wherein she sleeps, young through the years of doom, veiled with her hair's gold gloom, the pale Valkyrie, whom enchantment keeps. What do you think of that one?
Short but sweet. The Tower of Night with windows all alight frowns on a burning height wherein she sleeps. Something about that is just such a beautiful imagery.
Well, you know what? This is primordial fairy folklore imagery, right? That idea of the princess in the tower, the sleeping beauty that must be rescued, right? This is a primordial image, but Cawein is getting to the more deep depth of it, and he's connecting it even to that earlier Norse mythology with the Midgard snake and the Valkyrie, right? It's not simply like, this is not some princess simply to be rescued within the tower, but this is a warrior Valkyrie, a divine feminine, right? A powerful, transformative female, you know? And also, I wanted to highlight, like, on Isle of Purple, right? This is kind of a magical image we see a lot discussed in the Greek literature, where they're going to find the purple, and it's on these magical islands where these witches or these people live that have access to these various pharmakia, you know?
Mm.
And again, this idea of you have to get into the tower and try to perceive that feminine, to go and to see her, you have to battle the snake and to, right? It's this imagery too I wanted to point out of all of the tarot stuff that's going on. Anyone who's interested in the tarot, the tower, the princess, the snake, what I'm seeing here in image, in word form, is the image of the universe or the world card, which is a woman wrapped in a snake or wrapped in a sash with you normally a castle on her head or a castle in the background, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, lots of fun, that one. Okay. Let's go to this one here, though. Twilight Moth. This is a fun one. Dusk is thy dawn, when eve puts on its state of gold and purple in the marbled west. Thou comest forth like some embodied trait, or dim conceit, a lily bud confessed, or of a rose the visible wish, that white goes softly messengering through the night, whom each expectant flower makes its guest. All day the primroses have thought of thee, their golden heads close haremed from the heat. All day the mystic moonflowers silkenly veiled snowy faces that no bee might greet, or butterfly that weighed with pollen past, keeping sultana charms for thee at last, their lord who comest to salute each sweet. Cool-throated flowers that avoid the days, too fervored kisses, every bud that drinks, the tipsy dew into the starlight plays, nocturnes of fragrance that winged shadows links, in bonds of secret brotherhood and faith, or bearer of their order's shibboleth, like some pale symbol fluttering over these pinks. What dost them whisper in the balsam's ear that sets it blushing, or the hollyhocks? A syllabled silence that no man may hear, as dreamily upon its stem it rocks. What spell dost bear from listening plant to plant, like some white witch, some ghostly ministrant, some spectre of some perished flower flocks? O voyager, of that universe which lies between the four walls of this garden fair, whose constellations are the fireflies that wheel their instant courses everywhere, mid fairy firmaments wherein one sees mimic Boetes and the Pleiades. Thou steerest like some fairy ship of air, gnome wrought, of moonbeam fluff and gossamer, silent ascent. Perhaps thou chariotist Mab or King Oberon, or haply her, his queen Titania, or some midnight quest. Oh, for the herb, the magic Euphrasy, that should unmask thee to mine eyes, ah me, and all that world at which my soul hath guessed. This is a wild one.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, there's a lot. There's a lot here. Do you want to start?
So, what I want to highlight, and the reason why I selected this poem, is that Cawein is looking at his garden, okay? And through the image of perceiving his garden and watching the intricacies of the moths and the fireflies and the bees and the plants, he's perceiving the entirety of the function of the universe, right? He's listening to all these spirits, and they're showing him how the stars go, how they mimic, he references to important constellation, Bootes and the Pleiades, and he's using this mythic imagery, and he's bringing again this as above, so below, that through the perception of the natural world and through this communication with the natural spirits, that you can perceive and get to the greater unity of the universe itself, right?
Perfectly well said.
And again, it's all of this through the dreams and through the plants, right? And the plants are speaking. The plants, and if you ingest the plant, and if you to commune with the plant is to ingest them, and to also to engage in this gardening, this husbandry, this connection, this by tilling the earth and engaging in this, you're drawing down these spirits. You're giving them life, and you're connecting. There's a lot of power that's going on here.
There is. And I love the line, what dost them whisper in the balsam's ear that sets it blushing, or the hollyhocks? It's like, he's like, what is that divine? It's like, what is the magical word, or, what is the phrase?
Right? What is the language of the plants?
The language of the plants. Thank you. That's what I was getting at. Yeah.
We know they're speaking, and we know they know the mysteries. And I can see, like, this is a man. This is because reading Cawein's biography, there's this beautiful part where they talk about how he had like a super regimented life, okay, for most of his time in order to be as productive as he was. He'd get up super early in the morning. He'd have coffee. He'd write. And then he would go on this walk. And to this day now, they've made a park. I showed you the park in the first video, where it's his actual walk that he would take every day. And he would go up to this big gorge in the middle of this wood. And he would sit on the gorge, and he called it Satyr's Gorge. And he would sit there, and he would listen and watch. And he called this his garden. And I imagine that he's either speaking of this place or a similar place. And I can just picture him sitting there and seeing the mysteries unfold, seeing all the life talk to each other, watching the winds blow the trees, and listening to, if you take enough time and you really perceive nature, there's a intelligence and beauty there, right? And this is really what he's showing, I believe.
Yes, definitely. That reminds me of a Kafka quote. And it's like sit at your table and listen. Do not even, or I'm gonna butcher it, but the gist of it is that he says, if we are only patient, or if we only wait, the world will writhe in ecstasy before us. Is
Wow.
sort of the last line of the poem. That's the important part that I wanted to get across, is that it's about sometimes just being observant and watching everything unfold around you, and that's where that's how you'll see the mystery.
Beautiful. And I couldn't agree more. And I don't think Cawein could agree more either. Well said. So this is a really short one, but one that I really like. So it's called Valentine. My life is grown a witchcraft place, through gazing on thy form and face. Now 'tis thy smile's soft sorcery that makes my soul a melody. Now 'tis thy frown that comes and goes, that makes my heart a page of prose. Some day perhaps a word of thine will change me to thy Valentine.
Lovely.
And again, right, it's this love of the goddess and this perception of the goddess that brings out the witchery, that brings out this magic, this poetry, right? You know, and it's that transform. It's that muse by connecting to this divine feminine, this other, this perception. That's what's giving Cawein his ability to write like this. You know,
It's all the myriad of expressions that divinity can offer us. You know, the smile, the frown. That's like kind of like just two of them, but like it's a very interesting like way to get across that the sorcery is in the smile itself, you know, just like the revelry, the beauty, the pleasure of existing. And then the pain that comes with existing as well that's what inspires him to create.
right? And it's important too that you have the dichotomy of the smile and the frown, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wine is a naturalist. This is a person who believes in natural magic and in the magic of the transformative power of nature, of reincarnation, of this kind of transformation, right? So for him, no divinity could be purely good. That's a foolish notion. Good and evil are beyond the conception of divinity in a sense, right? These are human concepts based upon our perception of self and our world, right? It doesn't mean that our perceptions of good or bad are wrong. They just don't function in the same way to something like a deity, to something like this divine, feminine, universal world soul, which causes the unfolding of universes and galaxies. That force is concerned with the churn, right? The ever transformation and growth of universal expansion. Right? It doesn't have these same concepts, right? So the smile and the frown, these are equal aspects of her, right? And life is about learning to face this and to transform with her, right? To go with the flow. So much,
Exactly.
right? You have to go like with this kind of natural magic and this natural world. It's about ever changing and embracing that flux and what comes with it, good and bad, you know?
The only permanence is impermanence, right? And
Yep.
it's about embracing that. It's about, you know, it's about marveling in the beauty of nature, which can sustain us, but then also recognizing the visceral nature of reality as well, and the visceral nature of nature itself, and that can inspire us. And you know, we channel that through our art and through our philosophy and through these other types of pursuits.
Right. And also, I want to highlight the last line here. Someday, perhaps a word of thine will change me to thy Valentine. So it's this recognition of this divine feminine as this savior energy, this soteria, and that it has to be this reciprocated love. For the true magic, you like you long and you call for her, but you have to, like, at a sense, be chosen. There has to be, like, again, it's all in time and place, and it's this transformation, right? Like, it's it's intense and powerful, right?
Very.
And it brings up that longing, that desire, right? We all wish to be that, to be chosen, to experience her. And fundamentally, it has to be, we can call as long as we want. Until it's reciprocated, it's not reciprocated.
Artaud said that Eros is cruelty. And I think that I would agree with that. It's a force that can consume and destroy us, but it can also liberate us and connect us.
Right. That's so true, right? Within her face is both the smile and the frown.
Yeah.
Cool. So here's an interesting one. So Madison Cawein did not live to see World War I. He died just as it was kind of unfolding. So the events that we now consider as the spark of World War I had happened, but he wouldn't have had that context yet. It was so early in 1914 when he died. So this is kind of a prophetic, he could see the writing on the wall. This is very much of his time and place, right? So it's called AD 1900. War and disaster, famine and pestilence, vaunt couriers of the century that comes. Behold them shaking their tremendous plumes above the world, where all the air grows dense with rumors of destruction and ascents, cadaverous of corpses and of tombs, predestined, while like monsters in the glooms, bristling with battle, shadowy and immense, the nations rise in wild apocalypse, where now the boast earth makes of civilization, it brag of Christianity in vain. We seek to see them in the dread eclipse of hell and horror, all the devastation of death triumphant on his hills of slain.
Dark and real.
Right? Dark and real. And I also wanted to highlight, because this brings up a constant theme in Cawein's work, of this recognition of the place and the time and place of Christianity and the time and place of paganism. He was more interested in what he called the natural religion and natural magic. And he had no time for, like, even though I feel like he has this deep connection to this, Hellenistic paganism, he never would have used those terms. He was interested in something beyond, beyond labels, this natural unfolding of the universe, right? And what he recognized in both paganism and Christianity was that they were both of their time and of their place, and that they needed to be destroyed, right? And be reborn anew into something greater. So what I mean by this is that within a lot of this Hellenistic philosophy, you have the myth of cycles and this understanding of ideas and things evolving, right? And that our life stream is in this constant state of evolution, of reflection and refinement. And Cawein was constantly waiting for the day when we would move beyond Christianity, when we would see its limitations and recognize them as such, when we would stop bragging, And like we would look back on Christianity just like how many Christians look back on paganism, right? As outdated and immoral, even though it had some truths, right? And he wanted people to experience the true natural religion of the world. And here, what I see here is he's talking about he sees all of the nations rising, this predestined war, this prophecy, right? This coming catastrophe, again, dealing with this idea of the cycles, right? The centuries coming to an end, and the old stagnant ways have to, right? This is a natural unfolding. Death will be triumphant for a period. It's kind of scary. But I feel like he saw this as an inevitability,
We have to accept it, and once we accept it, we can move beyond it.
And we can learn, right? Like, it really,
we can learn from it. Yeah.
We can learn. It really makes me think of a lot of, like, I always love connecting things to science fiction. And those who know me on this channel, one of my favorite series of all time that I recommend to everyone is Foundation by Asimov. And what I see here is that same kind of philosophical idea where you see the coming collapse. You see society on the brink of doom. There are aspects of it that refuse to change, and there's a needed confrontation to resolve this. There has to be a death and a destruction and a transformation, So what do those of us who see the coming battle do? What are we meant to do? We have to build the foundation, the temple of the muses. We have to prepare for the oncoming storm and go back to those cultural truths that will hold us and prepare to rebuild anew once the fallout is over,
Well said.
Yeah. And it's kind of, it's scary, because we see these kind of cycles, right? A lot of people talk about every 250 years or so, cultures and countries, they have to go through an upset. You get another demagogue, right? Tyrants rise. Fascism or something of a similar ilk raises its ugly head. People turn to fear, and the methods of the past that are no longer working have to be abandoned. And sometimes in order to transform them, it requires a destruction, And it's a scary aspect of life, right?
It is, but we can't let it control and destroy us, right?
We have to constantly be thinking to the future, right? We have to remember, we have to move beyond these destructive ways. It's always this refinement. We always have to be learning from our mistakes and trying to grow beyond them, So with each new iteration, with each of these destructions, we have to learn from it and become something greater than before, Now is the time for reconciliation. What is failing? What is working, right? These are questions we need to be asking ourselves. But yeah, wild to think about, and it's kind of scary, This year is a really scary year with so many global elections coming, and next year too. Like, we in Canada have an election coming, and it's, there is a lot of fear in the air, unlike I've ever seen in my lifetime. Not since, the war in Iraq first happened after the tragedies of September 11th have I seen the kind of fear we're experiencing now. And I would argue that, the genocides that are going on in Israel and the wars that are around the world now are even more intense than they were then. It's hard to say, right? They feel more intense as an adult, I'll tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
It's easier to see the impact and implications of these types of events as we grow older and sort of learn from the world.
And, we have far more access now in real-time information. People can't cover things up like they could. It's an impossibility. Everything is kind of out in the open, right? At least when it's big, grandiose events. But it's I don't know. World is a scary place. It always has been, always will be, right? The kind of anxiety we feel now, Madison Cawein was feeling then at the turn of the, in the early 1900s. So the cycles repeat. But yeah, let's move on.
Sure.
Okay. All right. And an enemy. This is an interesting one. So an enemy anemone is both a nymph in Greek mythology, but it also is, the sea creature. So this
Yeah.
is kind of a play, right? So teach me the wisdom of thy beauty, pray, that being thus wise, I may aspire to see what beauty is, whence, why, and in what way, immortal, yet how mortal utterly. For shrinking loveliness, thy brow of day pleads plaintive as a prayer, an enemy. Teach me wood wisdom, I am petulant. Thou hast the wildness of a dryad's eyes, the shyness of an oread's wild plant. Behold the bashful goddess where she lies, distinctly delicate, inhabitant, ambrosial earthed, star cousin of the skies. Teach me thy wisdom, for through knowing, yet when I have drunk dull Lethe, till each vein thuds full oblivion, I shall not forget. For beauty known is beauty to sustain, glad memories with life, while mad regret and sorrow perish, being Lethe slain. Teach thee my beauty, being beautiful and beauty wise, my sight perfections, or my slight perfections, whole as world as man, in their creation full, as old a power's cogtation roll. Teach thee presumption, though thought is young and dull. Question thy God and what God is. Soul, what soul?
Really interesting piece. I love that. Question thy God, what God is. Soul, what soul. You
I
know that.
know,
What a final line.
right? What a beautiful, profound, and again, this is bringing us back to that nature religion that is at the essence of what Cawein is getting at, and this idea too of this constant reasoning and transformation. You got to be. It's the questioning that is the import, right? This is not about faith. This is about reason. You know, even though he's talking about fairies and mythology and all of this wild dream and drug imagery, he's grounded in this reason and in this questioning, right? It's just his questions lead him to the dream. They lead him to these realms of imagination, right? And he sees them as a reality, but of a different color, you know? And I love this too. He's asking the anemone, which is a sea star, and he sees the reflection again, as above, so below. In the sea star, he sees the goddess Aphrodite. And through the perception of the sea star and communication with her, you perceive and receive the goddess, you know?
Wow, that's it's very new, like layered. His work.
Right? And it's like, I love this too. Like, teach me wood wisdom, not just wisdom, but the wisdom of the forest, of that communication, of that interconnected life, right? This animism that pervades his work again, right? Teach me thy wisdom, for through knowing, yet when I have drunk dull Lethe, each vein thuds full oblivion, I shall not forget. So what he's saying here, he's like, teach me the truth so that I can overcome death. Lethe is that river. So you
Yeah.
remember this when we were reading about the Odyssey and all these other Greek stories, but Lethe is the river that you have to cross. And if you drink from the river Lethe, you lose yourself and you're dying, you're reincarnated, but you do not have that sense of self, right? So one of the secrets of the Orphic magic is to cross the river Lethe, and you're supposed to drink from the well, right? Aphrodite's well. And then you will not, lose yourself. You will get to you'll proceed, like you get to you have that immortality, right? It's not a physical. Well, it's what they call an ionic life, right?
Hmm.
Not a Christian immortality. There's still a death and a transformation. But what it is that there's a perception that proceeds through the transformation. That's the magic, you know? So he's
Sure.
talking about learning through the beauty and through the perception, learning to see the reincarnation and learning to come back and to perceive his, you know, to be glad with memories of life and to cling to them, to want to, you know, not to seek oblivion and destruction. This is another thing that I love to highlight too, because this kind of animistic, life affirming religion here, right? This is not spirituality like in a Buddhist sense. There is no extinguishing of life, there is no negation of self. Rather, there's an incorporation of the self within the whole, you know? And there is a pushing forward and an embracing of the suffering in spite of the pain, you know? Like, this is not a life rejecting religion, but a life affirming natural worldview that seeks to perceive the beauty and perceives the beauty as worth all of the suffering, you know?
That's very well said. You know me. I'm gonna bust out another Artaud quote,
Love it.
but to be in pain is not to suffer, but to survive.
That's Artaud always knows what to say.
No, he always knows.
He always knows.
But you know, Cawein is onto similar things here, and
Exactly.
yeah, it's that life, like you said, life affirming, and I think that's really important because she talks about the horror and like the horrors of war and the pain of death and the cruelty of the natural world, but somehow through all of that you're watching the mystery unfold, and if you can partake in that mystery, then it's like it sustains you.
Right. And there's also, it's learning to perceive the duality of the image, right? Within that destruction, there's a transformation, you know?
Exactly.
We'll get
Always.
in, well, we exactly, we'll get, you know, so with every death, there is a rebirth, you know? Like that Venus energy does not exist without Mars, right? With love comes violence, you know, like they're synonymous. All right. So this is a good one. This is his hymn to Aphrodite.
Ooh.
So oft of the hiding O reed wast thou seen, at earliest morn, a tall imperial shape, high buskined, dew dripped, and on close chaste curls, long blackness of thick hair, the tipsy drops caught from the dripping sprays under bosk. So I'm just gonna try to make this a little bigger here. There we go. Kissed of thy cheek and of thy shoulder brushed, thy rosy cheek as haughty hair as fair, thy snow-soft shoulders luminous as light. Oft did the shaggy hills and solitudes of Arethusa shout and ring and reel, reverberate and echo merrily, with the mad chiding of thy merry hounds, big-mouthed and musical, that on the stag or bristling wild boar furious grew in quest, and thou, as keen, fleet-footed and clean-limbed, thou, O goddess, with thy quivered crew, most loveliest maids and fit to wed with gods, rushed, swinging on the wind free limbs and lithe, long as thy radiant locks flung free to blow, and lighten in the wine-sharp air of morn. Ay me, their throats, their lusty, dimpled throats, what made the hills sing and the woodways dance, as if to Orphic strains, and gave them life. Ay me, their bosoms' deepness and the soft, sweet, happy beauty of their delicate limbs, that stormed the forest vacancies with light, swift daylight of their splendor and made blow, within the glad sonorous solitudes, old germs of flowerets a century cold. The woodland naiad, whispered by her rock, the hamadryad limpid-eyed and wild, expectant rustled by her usual oak, and laughed in wonder, and mad Pan himself reeled piping fiercely down the dingled deeps, with rollicking eyes that rolled a brutish lust, And did the unwed maiden musing where her father's well beyond the god-graced hills bubbled and battled, hear the full high cry of the chaste huntress, while her dripping jaw unheeded brimmed, vowed with her chastity, and shorn gold hair to veil her virgin feet. But not when the saucy daylight swims, filling the forest with a glamorous green. Let me behold thee, goddess, but when dim the slow night settles on the haunted wild, and walks in sober sark, and the heartful stars shine out intensely, and the echoey waste far off in shudders palpitates, unto the Linnad song unmerciful, unmerciful and mad and bitter sweet. Then come in all thy godhead beautiful, thou beautiful and gentle as thou camest to Lord Endymion, who in Lemnos once, lone in the wizard magic of the wild, wandered, a gentle boy unfriended, sad. It grew far off adorned the stirring trees, thy silent beauty blossoming flower-like between the tree trunks and the lacing limbs, bright in the leaves that kissed for very joy, in drunkenness of glory thus revealed. He saw it all, the naked brow and limbs, the polished silver of thy glossy breast, alone, unaccompanied of handmaidens, like some full splendid fruit Hesperian. Not even for deities thy sweet far voice came tinkling on his wistful ear and lisped, like leaves that cling and slip to cling again, and on such perilous beauty that must kill the poisonous favor of thy godliness, feasting his every sense through eyes and ears, his soul exalted, waxed and amorous, like the high gods who quaff deep golden bowls of rosy nectar with immortal love. And what remained, what remained but death?
Oh, that ending.
Just before we go, it's a mistitle here. This is actually Artemis, not Aphrodite. So this is the goddess Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, the perpetual virgin. Sorry, I mistitled that.
Oh, that's all right. It happens. That makes sense with one of the lines, like the quivered crew or whatever.
Exactly.
Whatever.
She has her quivered crew and her dogs, right? Her hunting hounds.
Yeah.
And she's in the woods, right? This is clearly Artemis. And again, we're retelling that story of Endymion. You know, the person who falls in love with Artemis, seeks her out, but then when he perceives her, he becomes destroyed by her. But it's just so profound, right? This ending, right? When he perceives her, it's so beautiful. It's so transcendent, so magical. He's experienced the totality of being, the fullness of the universe. So what is death but a new transformation? End this life. This life is meaningless. I perceived it all in you. You know, time for the next explosion. You know, to die is it's almost a glorification, right? It's transcendent. Again, it's that perception of this deity that is that monstrous, sublime, you know, that's transformative and frightening and beyond anything.
Very well said. It's a beautiful poem, and just again, just and what remained, what remains but death, you know? It's like after perceiving Artemis, it's like they do in essence are die and are destroyed because they're so profoundly changed,
right? And it's like it says it here, the poisonous favor of thy godliness, right? And he feasts, right? He consumes her through perceiving her, right? Feasts his every sense through eyes and ears, his soul exalted, waxed and amorous, right? Like the high gods who quaffed deep golden bowls of rosy nectar with immortal love. The perception of her, he's consumed the ambrosial drink, right? He's taken the Amrit. He's achieved immortality in her, right? So this is a transcendent moment. To perceive her is to become her and to be destroyed by her. It's that transformative act again, right? That destruction, that death and rebirth. You know, this is something that a lot of people forget, is that within a lot of these pagan traditions, especially within the Greco-Roman tradition, to achieve deification, there has to be a destruction, there has to be a death, right? You have to achieve apotheosis. Heracles is stuck alive on a pyre and set ablaze before he becomes a deity. You know, Orpheus is ripped apart and has his head placed upon his lyre and floated down the rivers to Lesbos, where he becomes a talisman for prophecy. You know, like,
Yeah.
to perceive the goddess is to be destroyed. To achieve the deity is to you have to shed this mortal skin. You have to die and be reborn. You know.
Definitely. It's
What remains but death? And after perceiving Artemis, man.
yeah. Thanatos, always there.
Any last comments for this one?
I think we're good.
Okay. All right. Yeah, these two are pretty cute. They both go in hand. So the first one is at moonrise, and then the next one is at moonset. Or sorry, at sunset. At moonrise. Pale faces looked up at me, up from the earth like flowers. Pale hands reached down to me, out of the air like stars. As over the hills robed on with twilight, the hours, the day's last hours departed, and dusk put up her bars. Pale fingers beckoned me on. Pale fingers like starlit mist. Dim voices called to me, dim as the wind's dim room. As up from the night like a nymph from the amethyst, of her waters as silver as foam, rose the round white breast of the moon. And I followed the pearly waving and beckoning of hands, the luring glitter and dancing glimmer of feet, and the sibilant whisper of silence that summoned to lands remoter than legend or fairy, where myth and tradition meet. And I came to a place where the shadow of ancient night brooded over ruins far wilder than castles of dreams. Fantastic, a mansion of phantoms, where wandering white I met with a shadowy presence whose voice I had followed, it seems. And the ivy waved in the wind, and the moonlight laid like a ghostly benediction, a finger wand, on the face of the one whose eyes the darkness rayed, the face of the one I had known in the years long gone. And she looked in my face and kissed me on the brow and on cheek, murmured my name and wistfully smiled in my eyes, and the tears welled up in my heart that was wild and weak, and my bosom seemed bursting with yearning, and my soul with sighs, and there mid the ruins we sat. Oh, strange were the words that she said, distant and dim and strange, and hollow the looks that she gave, and I knew her then for a joy that was dead, a hope, a beautiful hope that my youth had laid in its grave.
Wow. What a poem. Where myth and tradition meet. That line really jumped out at me. You know, it's like the rights merging with the other, and it's like about the interplay and the dialogue between those things, you know.
Right. And I just love this thing too. Like, he's going to the ancient remotest path, right? That place even beyond myth, right? And I came to a place where the shadow of ancient night brooded o'er ruins far wilder than castles of dreams. What he's hinting at here is, like, again, if we go to the ancient Hellenistic traditions, right? The oldest cosmologies have at the beginning this, either the chaos gap, or they have Nyx, the goddess personified as night, right? That which is not created, that which things come out of, that absolute other, right? That primordial strangeness. And he's talking about going back to the beginnings of creation and see ruins of a dreamed of past. So it's almost like we're built upon the ruins of a previous cycle again. Again, with these cycles, even in our ancient past, there is a distant, more fabled memory of another forgotten vision of us, another reality, another dream, you know?
It's beautiful.
It's so interesting. And it just brings up so many interesting, like implications about all, again, this magic of the cycles and this transformation. I also want to point out here he's the imagery of Aphrodite and the moon and the foam of the waters and the nymph amethyst, which is that purple stone. Again, it's this idea of through the perception of the goddess going back to the beginning. This is something that we talk about in the mysteries. So much of the mystery rites was learning to heal the wounds of separation that were at the result of the beginning of creation, right? That separated us from this divine chaos womb, this Nyx, this goddess of the night, right? That perpetual other, that uncreated creatrix. So he's talking about going back to that Aphrodite Urania, that primordial mother birthing image at the beginning of time, and it's beautiful. And what he finds there is ruins of other creations. We're not the only one. We're one of many, an ever-churning cycle of reality upon reality upon reality upon reality. I feel like someone like Cawein would love video games and would love multiple universe theories and stuff like this, because he kind of hints at this kind of stuff within his poetry, but it's hard to say what he actually believed, and all of this stuff it comes well after him. So, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it's fun to speculate.
Right? So this is the sister poem.
Okay.
At moonrise, at sunset. Into the sunset's turquoise marge, the moon dips like a pearly barge. Enchantment sails through magic seas to fairyland Hesperides, over the hills and away. Into the fields in ghost gray gown, the young-eyed dusk comes slowly down. Her apron filled with stars she stands, and one or two slip from her hands, over the hills and away. Above the wood's black cauldron bends, the witch-faced night in muttering blends, the dew and heat whose bubbles make the misk and musk that haunt the break, over the hills and away. Oh, come with me and let us go beyond the sunset lying low, beyond the twilight and the night, into love's kingdom of long light, over the hills and away.
I love the repeat of the over the hills and away of, like, you can picture the sun just falling behind the hills in the distance, and it's a beautiful motif that he sort of plays with.
Right? And I want to highlight the magical quality of this. So when we look at a lot of the ancient myths, many of the earliest ritual magical actions were about causing the sun to rise, right? We were about making sure that the sun would come up. And when the night would descend, people believed it was like a literal death. It was an ending, And so much of the magical world and magical creation is about perceiving into the future, about imagining a new creation, a new dawn, a coming day, right? This is an important thing. This is that magic of the next day, over the hills and away. We're constantly imagining a new future, a new creation. We're moving with this thing, We're coming on with a new dawn. With the sunset is not a death, but we're imagining the next, we're calling the sun to rise again, right? Even as we're entering this end where there's this twilight, we're also imagining that at the end of the cycle is the rebirth of love's kingdom, right? And that will take us into that over the hills and far away, right? Love and beauty are always on the horizon.
Always. Well said. That's beautifully said. And this idea that even as the sun is setting and dying, we're preparing for its rebirth. Above the wood's black cauldron bends the witch-faced night, and muttering blends. It's like the rites are already in preparation as soon as the sun is down. It's like, okay, time for the next rite, time for the next
right?
ritual.
But
Gotta
also, what's
keep the
happening
cycle
here?
going.
What does the goddess night do? During the night, everything is cooked up and reformed anew, right? To give birth with the next coming dawn, to project that new love's kingdom, right? So in this death, you're transformed in that cauldron of witch-faced night, right? You're part of her magic spell. You were born with the coming dawn, you know? Love it, eh?
It's beautiful. I love it.
So much fun. Let's continue here.
Sure.
So this is a bit of a longer one, but this is one of my favorite poems by him. It's called Beautiful Bosomed O Night. Beautiful bosomed, O night, in thy noon, move with majesty onward, soaring as lightly as a singer may soar the notes of an exquisite tune, the stars and the moon. Through the celestiores high of the heaven, the firmament's halls, under whose saffron walls June Hesperian June, robed in divinity wanders, daily and nightly, the turquoise touch of her robe, that the violets star, the silvery fall of her feet that lilies are, fill the land with languorous light and perfume. Is it the melody mute of burgeoning leaf and of bloom? The music of nature that silently shapes in the gloom? Immaterial hosts of spirits that have the flowers and leaves in their keep. Whom I hear, with their sighs of silver and pearl, invisible ghosts, each sigh a shadowy girl, whose whisper in leaves and glimmer in blossoms, and hover in color and fragrance and loveliness, breathe from the deep, world soul of the mother, nature, who over and over, both sweetheart and lover, goes singing her song from one sweet month to the other. So I want to pause here because he breaks it up into sections. And this is just so beautiful, talking about this mother goddess as the world soul, right? This is the tarot card, that world card, which is Prosperine, the core, Persephone, that goddess, that virgin goddess, as the universe, as the world itself, that perpetual mother. It's just beautiful. And like this idea, right? Like the music of nature that silently shapes in the gloom, immaterial hosts of spirits that have the flowers and leave in their keep, right? It's the spirits of nature coming out by her and through her. The lilies are the reflections of the stars, right? They're her personified in the earth. And like there's this interconnection, right? Again, between the above and the below. It's just, yeah, really beautiful. What do you think?
What do I think? Oh man. It's very beautiful imagery. Um I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head for the most part, in terms of what I would have said already.
Yeah, all good.
But I love the line, where was it? Where was it? June, Hesperian June, robed in divinity wanders daily and nightly. Just a wonderful image, I thought.
Yeah. Well, June, right? Juno, that's the goddess Hera, right? The mother who sits upon the throne. And Hesperides, related to those magical islands where the gods live and are transformative, right? It's this, right? and she's the one who brings all of the life, the invisible spirits that embody everything. Again, this profound animism that is essential to everything Cawein. You know. Let's go to
yeah. Let's go to part 2.
part 2. Okay. Lo, 'tis her songs that appear in forest and field, on hill, land, and lea, as visible harmony, materialized melody, crystallized beauty, that out of the atmosphere utters itself in wonder and mystery, peopling with glimmering essence the hyaline, far, and the near.
Wow.
I love this idea. He's so good at showing how the whole universe is this melody, this vibration of sound, this unfolding, right? It's so Orphic what he's getting at. And it crystal, like as the sound comes together and harmonizes, it's that harmony that crystallizes into beauty that gives form and essence. You know?
Yeah, it's like the the ancient belief of like the primordial resonance, and then all these other notes that start, like microtones start appearing, and these other vibrations, and from these the interplay of these different sounds is where creation actually unfolds.
Right. This is such a profound idea. Like we see this at the heart of like Shaivite theology, with this idea of spanda, which is the vibration of God. Like the universe exists as this vibration. You see this also within other Hindu philosophies, like this concept of Vak, which is that voice, the melody, the song of the Vedas that perpetuates the unfolding of the universe. And it's this engagement in that song which is heard and recited that perpetuates creation and moves it forward. You know, we see this with Orpheus clearly in his songs, and how he can control the natural world and can even confront death, right? And it's this idea too, like that the all of reality is this magical unfolding of vibration, and that everything is kind of harmonized in chorus. And this is so essential to a lot of Greek philosophy. Like one of the most important Greek philosophers is Heraclitus, right? His most famous quote, even though it's Pantachore, which is everything dances, or everything in flux, everything moves. Basically, his most famous is everything dances, nothing stands, right? Because the universe is ever in harmony. And the more we're in harmony, the more we materialize, the greater, more beautiful forms come, you know? And there's this deep realization here too, I feel like we as individuals are peopled by this multitude of beings that come together in a harmonic essence that then make up an individual self. But we are, even though we're an individual self, there's still that individuality of all our composite parts. And each of those in Cawein's philosophy is an animistic spirit, right? Down to its individual atoms, you know, like the infinitesimally small is as important as the deity at the top, right? And the idea is to realize and become that deity, to embody that idealized form. So it's this ever expansion and evolution that even humanity will evolve to eventually become that goddess, to embody that galaxia, you know?
Definitely. It's beautiful. And it reminds me, doesn't remind me, but it makes me think about I need to catch my thought before it runs away from me. But this notion of like every single part of you has a spirit and is of the divine, and even like you said, even though we're our separate selves, we're not really separate. We just think that we're separate because we've been conditioned to think that way through institutions and philosophy of various times, right? And it's about recognizing that the divine is us. We are the divine, as like you said, as above, so below. And in I'm kind of losing where I was going with this, so I'm just gonna.
No, I get what you're saying though, right? Like this idea that we are this, yeah, that above so below thing is so important. This interconnection that, you know, on one hand we are an individual, right? We are a self, but it's important that we recognize that a lot of that sense of self and perception is a creation of a billion composite parts that have come together, you know. And while our self is a true reality, we are also the billion composite parts. And this is true of the universe itself, right? The goddess is this absolute divinity that is the entirety of the universe embodied, but she's also its all composite parts, as above so below, you
Like
know.
like a plasmodial slime mold. Don't know if you're familiar with those, but they're like these super entities of like single celled organisms that operate in tandem as one larger whole.
Wild.
And they're very fascinating. I suggest you read about them because it's really giving me these vibes.
Right. Well, I remember learning in I took some basic science in university way back in the day, and I remember learning, like life as we understand it, animal life happened when the cell and the mitochondria merged. At one point these were two separate entities.
Yeah.
Now we can't imagine them as separate, right? They created this symbiotic essence that has become the foundation for all of the animal life that we know it, but at the same time they are separate, like you can go inside a cell and
your
see them.
mRNA is different from your DNA, right?
Exactly. It's wild to think about, and when you recognize all of this, and then you can even go further, right? We can break it down to the atomic level, and even and that's when things start to break down for our current understanding, but we're ever working at refining it, right? And it's just so beautiful.
It's about recognizing this profound symbiosis between all things,
Right.
because we all come from the same cosmic womb.
Yep. And we all are that world soul, right? The mother is the world soul, right? She's the universe embodied in a single form, just as we are the self embodied in a single form, even though we are made up of our atoms, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's continue.
Let's keep going.
Yeah. So part 3. Behold how it sprouts from the grass and blossoms from flower and tree, in waves of diaphanous moonlight and mist, in fugue upon fugue of gold and of amethyst. Around me, above me, it spirals, now slower, now faster, like symphonies born of the thought of a musical master. O music of earth, O God, who the music inspired, let me breathe of the life of thy breath, and so be filled and attired, in resurrection triumphant over time and over death.
Oh God, who the music inspired.
Right?
I love that. It's like the our constructed perception of this deity, isn't as old as the universe itself.
No, it's a reflection of the song. It's simply an image that exists because of the song, right? Like again, Madison is trying to always get to that natural, pure religion, and the true God is the song itself. Our conception is merely a conception placed upon the song,
Mm-hmm.
and Let me breathe of the life of thy breath, and so be fulfilled and attired in resurrection triumphant over time and death. Right? Like I just love this. Through the song and through the perception of that harmony, you know, time and death are meaningless. You are the unfolding of creation. You exist within that ever-folding song. Your note never silences. It forever reverberates in harmony.
It does. And I just, in fugue upon fugue of gold and of amethyst, you
Right?
know, it's
Magical.
wonderful.
And like you know, he loves to use a lot of of $10 or $5 words. I love them though, like diaphanous, right? Like a nice veil of light. Right?
It's an impeccable choice.
Right?
Impeccable choice.
Very beautiful. All right. So that was Beautiful Bosomed O Night in 3 parts. This is just a really short one, but it's similar. It's called Beauty. High as a star, yet lowly as a flower. Unknown she takes her unassuming place at earth's proud masquerade. The appointed hour strikes, and behold, the marvel of her face.
High as a star, yet lowly as a flower, as above, so below. You know, it's right there in the first line.
Right? And she is representative of that totality of the earth, right? And you marvel upon her face, the face of creation, you
At
know?
the appointed hour, the right
Right?
time and place.
Which is what? What's the appointed hour? Do you know? Do you have the ears to hear?
I don't think I do.
I'm just teasing. It's the dawn, of course, right? When the
Oh,
morning
yeah.
star is most visible, right? That Venus.
Right.
And I want to point out too that this idea of the face, the marvel of her face, this is something that you constantly see in regards to the muse and to the goddess, right? To characters like Helen or Medea. The eyes and the face, this powerful transformation where to gaze upon her is to be consumed by her, or to be to be taken in, to be enthralled and raptured, right? Oop, sorry.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's short and beautiful.
I love it.
So we'll just read a couple more, and when we get to the 2-hour mark, we'll call it a night. And we'll come back for another part, because there's just so many cool Cawein poems. And I was just really, what I did is I took a bunch of my favorites and I slapped them in alphabetical order. So
Sometimes it's the best way to do it.
I just had so many, and it's like, how do you pick? How do you pick? You know what? We're going through them all. You know, we'll do like anytime we don't have another episode planned, we can always come back and read more Cawein, right?
Perfect.
So this is Beauty and Art. The gods are dead, but still for me lives on in wildwood, brook, and tree. Each myth, each old divinity. For me, for me still laughs among the rocks, the naiad and the dryad's locks, drop perfume on the wildflower flocks. The satyr's hoof still prints the loam, and whiter than the wind-blown foam, the O-reed haunts her mounted home. To him whose mind is fain to dwell with loveliness no time can quell, all things are real, imperishable. To him, whatever facts may say, who sees the soul beneath the clay, is proof of a diviner day. The very stars and flowers preach a gospel old as God and teach philosophy a child may reach, that cannot die, that shall not cease, that lives through idealities of beauty, even as Rome and Greece, that lifts the soul above the clod, and working out some period of art is part and proof of God.
Oof. He's you know, again, it's this recognition that the myths themselves are alive, and he's seeing the traces of these myths in nature itself. You know, the satyr's hoof still prints the loam.
Right?
It's like he sees where the divine walks upon the earth itself.
Exactly. And this again is getting to this idea that the true essence of beauty, of art, of spirituality is where? In the unfolding of the natural world, right? The gods are dead, right? This is not something literal. This is something he's saying that society has told us. We've abandoned the myths, we've abandoned that period of time, but he's like, I look into the trees and they're still there. For me, they still are in the rocks, they're still in the wildflowers, they're still in the foam, they're everywhere, right? And this natural philosophy is perceivable to everyone. And though you guys may try to kill it, you may say the gods are dead, or though it falls out of favor, the natural world always comes back. This philosophy always reasserts itself because it is that natural way. It's just the unfolding. It's timeless. It's beyond speech. It is the very vibration of reality itself. To be is to perceive it. You just have to sit back and have the wherewithal to listen.
I have to listen. Once more, just because I'm obsessed with them. Like in our Toad, the theater and its double. But no matter how loudly we clamor for magic in our lives, we're truly afraid of pursuing an existence entirely under its influence and sign. Unless you're Cawein.
Right.
Kawaii's ready for the magic. He's like, no, we need this in our lives. This will enrich us. This will sustain us. This will allow us to transform and become something greater than what we are now, which, to be honest, isn't that great.
Right. And he saw, like he said, within the natural world, this primordial natural philosophy of life, of living, of joy, of learning to overcome, of reincarnation, of transcendence. So much of our lives are like he was existing at a time of hyper industrialization, of mobilization of war, of the loss of the natural world. And what he's telling us is that in spite of all this transformation, degradation, and industrialization, the natural world still persists, and that truth cannot be denied. It's perceivable even to the child. It simply exists. And if only you would take the time to, instead of passing such critical judgment upon imagined ideas, to listen and to look and to be inspired, you would see the truth of mythology and the magic, and you would hear the spirits. And is it an imagined perception? Yes. Is it also a real perception? Yes. This is the thing with Cawein. Imagination and the dream are a reality unto themselves, and equally as valid and as important as the real world from which they are inspired. They're part and parcel of each other, and they need to coexist.
Definitely. That brings to mind a Studio Ghibli film. Well, technically it predates Studio Ghibli, but it's considered a Ghibli film because it's Miyazaki. Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind.
I love that movie.
It's such a great film, and it's like, people recoil in horror at the natural world because of because it's so monstrous. But then Nausicaa realizes that we actually created this monster, and now we're casting it away like this rejected creature. And then at the end, just to spoil it a little bit, at the end you see the sprout coming up out of the soil next to her mask, and it's like the reconciliation.
Have you ever read the book, the manga?
I still need to.
You need to read the manga because the manga is so much more dark. But it's also not, if you are truly perceiving the reality of the natural world, right? Because in the manga, it's clear by the end that the time of humanity is over. But this is not the end of life. The life on earth found a way to transform the vileness that we brought and to make a new world. And like you said, it ends with the plants growing, right? The Om have learned to transform the poison and to make a new reality, right? And this is the thing, the cycles transform. We in our hubris destroyed what worked for us, and so we can no longer persist. But what happens? We're reformulated into something that can. Life still is still exists. It finds a new way. It's now the Om way, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever, right? And a lot of people couldn't handle that. That's why it doesn't appear in the movie, So
That's
even
an
in the movie, it's
interesting
kind of implied.
So I'll have to read that.
Yeah. It's long too. It's much longer. It's really, really, really worth it. If you like Miyazaki, so can't recommend it.
I love him. So,
and we will be at some point we will do a Miyazaki Dragon episode, but it's just like, oof. Right? And talking about Cawein, there's a certain level of like, well, most people don't know who the F this dude is. But when you're talking about Miyazaki, people
come in with expectations and presuppositions,
and the knowledge base that maybe we don't have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if you're going to talk about someone like of his stature, then you got to come correct. You know what I mean? Bring something interesting and know what you're talking about.
Take your time with that one.
Yeah. But I think this will wrap it up for today. We'll end with that, beauty and art. I love Cawein. It was so much fun to go through with him, with you, Graham. Do you have any thoughts on the poems that we discussed today? What do you want to leave our audience with?
What to leave them with? I think the important thing to take away from Cawein is that, especially if you're feeling overwhelmed by the horrors of society, and if you're feeling lost and like you can't contribute or overcome the horror, just look around you. Look at the world itself, and you'll see the beauty. And, that will help you move forward and overcome that horror and pain and uncertainty.
The true magic, the true mystery is found in the natural world. You want to be a magician, you want to be a witch, you want to learn magic, you have to go into nature. You have to gain that plant knowledge. You have to experience the world, and you have to converse with the spirits there, and and listen, learn to watch, go sit in a garden and perceive the interworkings of the natural world, and learn to be quiet and commune, and you will see the mystery of the universe unfold before you, the transformation of the galaxies and the stars through the flight of the bees and the pollination and the workings of ants. It's all there. And Cawein is telling you, listen to the plants, listen to the nature, engage with the medicine, and use your imagination, engage with the dream. It's not a reality in this world, but it doesn't mean it's not a truth. It's not a type of beautiful, connected realism that doesn't need to be engaged with, right? And in some ways, those perceptions in the dream are more real than our current reality,
Beautifully said.
So everyone, go out, read some Cawein. He's widely available. His stuff is free, and he's got thousands and thousands of poems. Go check him out. Can't recommend him enough. And next week we won't be back because Graham has some family things that he's going to be doing. But we'll be back the following Saturday, probably with more Cawein, but we'll see what's on the horizon. Graham is also working on an episode on Artaud to finish off our Artaud series, talking about Heliogabalus.
Yeah. So this is the book, Heliogabalus. And I'm going to be going through that over the next couple of weeks and taking a lot of notes. And I'm very excited to talk about this one because, you know, I know a lot about Artaud, but he talks about things in here that I'm not super well versed in, and I know that you are. And so I'm excited to glean, some different perspectives about this.
It's going to
And
be fun. We're going to get so deep into the mother goddess cult. So I love it.
great.
Right. So, Graham, do you have I know you've been busy. What new projects do you have on the work that you want to talk about? Because I know you have new music that you've been working on. You have a synth project. You just finished a couple poetry things. What do you got going on?
Yeah, so to quickly summarize, my friend John and I, about a month ago, released an EP under our moniker, the Isosceles Infection, and it's like progressive metal sort of stuff. A little EP. We'll be releasing CDs in the next while, and then I released a Warhammer 40,000 themed synth album that was. My goal was to walk into the project with the intent to make it entirely improvised.
Mm.
So none of it is pre-planned or thought out or anything. It's all
You don't even like set out chord forms or anything. You don't like. You just improvise it all. Wow, that's
improvised,
awesome.
and it's just about the magic of the moment. And
Cool.
then the only other thing really right now is I just released copies of Sacred Armaments, Essential for Vanquishing Psychiatric Demons, which
Such a good book.
I had a lot of fun writing that one. I went into it with a lot of hope surrounding my treatment, my ECT treatment, which didn't end up working. So initially I was like a little bit bitter towards this collection. But then I came to realize that this is more like a reflection of what I was thinking and feeling at the time of creating it, and that's just as important, I think.
I love that collection. The whole idea of creating, your own magic to combat your psychiatric demons and your own mythology. That was such a fun one. I highly recommend people go check out the episode we did going through that because I honestly think it's some of your best work. I know it's taken on a different color in the moment, but I think in a few years you'll approach it again with new eyes,
It's a work that I'm proud of, and I especially love how the artwork turned out. And I've gotten a few orders. It's just a matter of sending them all out, and
Awesome.
that's pretty much all I've got going on right now.
Amazing. So everyone, look to the links below and you can get to Graham's link tree and find links to all his music and his poetry and his art. Always support his publication house, Things in My Chest, where he has all of his personal poems as well as his collection of fundraising poetry for mental health. And you're going to be doing a second release of that soon, though, as well, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to. It's the difficult thing with releasing a project about mental health is that every single person involved has mental health difficulties.
Of course.
It's difficult to coordinate, but
Right.
it's slowly coming together, and
Beautiful.
I'm very excited for it. I don't want to give like a tentative date or deadline for it yet, but it will be a collection of about 10 or so poets, as well as a bit of my own writing. And the whole theme is mental illness, mental health, and the integration, how to use art to mitigate the pain of this nature of existence. And all of these proceeds are going to be donated to a mental health organization.
Right. And if anyone is interested in this kind of a project, you do have for your first edition currently up on Things in My Chest that people can purchase, which has poetry by you and a bunch of other incredible artists. And as I said, all proceeds from those collections go to mental health advocacy. So, yeah, that was a lot of fun, Graham. Madison
Yeah.
Cawein is a cool character. So thank you for listening and for joining me to discuss these poems.
It
And we'll
was a
be back in a couple weeks to talk more Cawein and or potentially Heliogabalus. We'll see where the cards lay.
you know.
All right. Well, take care, everyone. Peace and love. And let me get our outro song. Here we go.
And I wondered who his master could be. And I pressed my eye eagerly to the grave. And I wondered who his master could be. And I pressed my eye eagerly to the grave. And I wondered who his master could be. And I pressed my eye eagerly to the grave. And I wondered who his master could be. And I pressed my eye eagerly to the grave. And I wondered who his master could be. And I pressed my eye eagerly to the grave. And I wondered who his master could be.